change it ever made it.
Okay.
Okay, we are now live for another tech talk. And today, this is like part 2 or 3 of a occasional series on the new quiz, right?
Yeah, we've done a couple.
We've done a couple. And specifically, we wanted to talk about item banks in new quizzes, which are noticeably different from old question banks in some very important ways. So we wanted to spend some time untangling that a little bit. And Melanie has accidentally become our resident expert on item banks. So Melanie is going to be leading the show today.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Caleb. Yeah, so just the overview. Item banks are to new quizzes as question banks are to classic quizzes. So there are some benefits to using some item banks, and namely that they are connected to the user instead of to the course. So any item banks that a user has associated with them, they will have access to in any of their courses, as well as any item banks that have been shared with them. And so that's a really nice benefit. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll take a look at item banks here. Things going on. Okay. Great. So I guess the first thing that we should take a look at is how to enable new quizzes in your Canvas course if you haven't done that, because you will not have access to item banks if you haven't enabled the option for new quizzes. So you're going to want to go to settings, feature options, and then under new quizzes, you can click this check mark and you can have new quizzes enabled or disabled. So you're going to want it enabled so that you can use item banks. The nice thing about this is once you've done this, you're not committed to using new quizzes and item banks. You can choose still between classic quizzes and new quizzes. You'll have that option every time you create a new quiz. You'll be asked if you want it to be a new or classic.
Although there is a setting up there default to new quizzes. If you decided, I've been playing with this, I love it, I'm 100% all in on new quizzes, you could make that the default, but you don't have to.
Yes, yeah, good point. So I'm choosing to not have mine be the default now because I like to be able to bounce back and forth and look at both options. All right, so there's 2 ways to create an item bank. So you can create one from scratch, or you can create one from a quiz that is already populated with questions. So if I were to create one from scratch, I guess I'll go back. I clicked on item banks here on my left side course navigation.
And that item banks option will show up once new quizzes is enabled, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not visible to students in the nav bar.
It should not be,
Right.
right?
So
Just like.
Right. Yeah.
And then to create a new item bank, you just simply click add bank. I'm going to call this Tech Talk Demo Item Bank. And this is where you can choose to share it with the course. If you do that, it's easy to find, and it means that anyone who is a teacher in this course will have access to the item bank. So I'm going to go ahead and share with the course. You don't have to do that.
Because as the owner of that item bank, it'll always be available to you no matter where you are.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Right.
All right, so that's one way to create an item bank. And then we're going to look at the other way. We're going to just create one through a quiz. So I'm going to click on this is a new quiz I've already created. It's just a demo quiz. And I'm going to come down and click build. This is where we do all the editing for these new quizzes. It's in build, it's no longer edit. And I just put 2 questions in here for examples. So if I edit the question and scroll down to the bottom, I see this option for item banking. So I'm going to expand that, add to bank, and I can add it to an existing item bank. So perhaps the one I just created, or I can make a new item bank. So demo 2. Okay, so I've created a new item bank, I've added it to that item bank.
So that's probably the way to go if you have a bunch of existing quizzes and now you want to start turning them into banks.
Yeah,
You don't have to rebuild all those questions from scratch.
that's a good way to think
But
about
you,
it.
but do you have to choose each individual question one at a time
You do.
to add the new bank? Okay.
Yeah, at least from what I've seen, I have not found a way to batch add questions into a bank.
Okay.
It's one by one, so I could come down here to the next one. I can do the same thing, I can go through edit and then scroll down to item banks, and then once again, I can add this to one that already exists or create a new one.
Well, and that kind of brings up something, as you've been kind of creating these, probably would be a really good idea to have a standardized format for your labeling. So for example, this is going in this course, you used it at this time period, that kind of stuff, so you can easily find it when you're in that search bar, right? Because
Are you
over
talking about
time,
labeling questions or labeling items?
labeling or naming the item banks so that you can easily find them later. Because also I saw in your item banks menu, there was also a search bar, so having something that kind of, I don't know, is memorable and makes sense for what you're doing, like this is my fall, or maybe not even doing it by
Well, you
term,
wouldn't,
but
probably
probably
wouldn't
by
do
course
course name,
potentially,
yeah.
something that would make that a little
Good.
easier.
I like to label mine by assignment or by topic, so sometimes I'll have like plate tectonics investigation or plate tectonics lab or,
Gotcha.
right, so I guess, yeah, whatever works for each person may be a little different, but. That's a good point. So another way I can access my item bank, so we looked at how to do it on this left side. I'm pretending there's a left side navigation panel here. But we can also get to our item banks through within quizzes, through our vertical ellipses. If I click manage item banks, that will take me back to the page with all my item banks. And then as Nick pointed out, we have this search bar. So I can search for my Tech Talk demos that I just created. Okay, oh, actually, that's not what I wanted to do. All right, so we created item bank from scratch. We created an item bank by adding questions from a quiz. So let's just take a look at now editing item banks. So this is the page that then will list all of my item banks. So in fact, this one is listing item banks associated with this course. If other people shared item banks with me, I would see them listed by clicking on shared. And so speaking of sharing, that's one of the really cool benefits of item banks is they are living at the user level, and so it makes sharing with other users and other courses easier. Is that me or that's me?
That was just an echo.
Okay. Actually, I should. Okay, I don't see the chat. All right. So here within this name of the item bank area, if we click share. So this is a really nice feature. Oops, I lost it. So you have lots of options for sharing. So one is sharing it with the institution. So if I click here, anyone at Community College of Spokane.
Any instructor, right?
I'm sorry, thank you. Any instructor, not students. Students don't have access to these item banks at all. So any instructor at the Community Colleges of Spokane will have access and will be able to see this item bank, and it will show up here when they see their banks.
As institution banks. Or,
If I share with the institution,
Right, okay.
it'll show up, thank you, as institution banks. And then you can decide, so I personally probably wouldn't share all mine with the institution, it depends on what they're for. But you can decide if you want to give view or edit access. Okay, then you can also decide if you want to share it with a specific course or with a specific person. So for example, I can type in e-learning and it'll show me a list of all the courses related to e-learning, that term. So I could choose to share this with 2017 e-learning academy Canvas shell if I wanted, and anyone who is a teacher in that shell could then view this item bank, or I can allow them to edit the item bank, and I would simply click add. I can also search a person. Oopsie. So I can share this with Caleb. And I want to give Caleb view access to this, so I'm going to add him.
and when it says view access, that means I could use this item bank in my own quizzes. I just can't change any of the questions.
Yes, good point.
And that search bar is weird because you use the same search bar to search for course sections and individual users, which is a little unusual in Canvas.
Yeah. And so I've clicked done. I've added Caleb, so I can go back now and I can see that I have edit access to this bank. Caleb can view this bank. I still can change it anytime I want. And then if I click this tab, this will tell me what courses have access. So I've shared it with the current course that I created it in, but I could go back and I could share it with any other courses. So that might be useful if you are creating, for example, some sort of template course for other instructors or for adjuncts, and you want them to have access to your item banks specific to those courses. If you share the item bank with those courses, then any other instructors will see those item banks, and then you can decide if you want them to view or edit those item banks. All right, so that's the share option. If we click this edit option, that's just for editing the title of the item bank. And then of course you can delete it. Now, if you want to edit items within your item bank, you're going to click into that item bank. Oh, I guess I didn't add questions yet. I guess there's a different one. I thought I added questions.
But I don't think you paired that one with the course, so that one probably just lives in your.
Okay, so let's do that. So let's find, well, it's just still like, yeah, we go all banks.
There it is in the demo too.
And there's other item banks
Okay.
anyway that I guess I could have pulled up one question. Yeah, okay. So we can, now we're in this item bank and we can edit the question. I can copy or move this question to another item bank or delete it. Okay. So another thing in terms of searches. So if let me just go back for a minute. All right, so within the item bank, it gives us this search option. So imagine I've got, several questions in here and I want to search out certain ones. I can use this search bar. I can type in keywords and they'll pull words from the question stem or the distractors, or if I give the question a title. I can also filter it. So I can filter by type of question. So if I'm looking only for true false questions, if I had those in here, I can filter through that, or I can filter through tags and metadata. So going back into my edit question, if I want to tag my questions, so for example, all questions about Mount Rainier, right? Then when I'm looking for questions about Mount Rainier, if I've tagged them that way, I can find it in the search.
Oh,
So
so you can get really detailed in your organization if you have, a library of hundreds of questions. You can do it that way. Interesting.
yeah. So just for those of you who like to be really organized.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a new feature within item banks. All right, so we talked about creating item banks, we talked about editing item banks, sharing item banks. I think let's take a look at adding questions from item banks into a quiz. Is that a good way to go here? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my modules page. I'm going to just open this example quiz. Click build. Okay, so whereas before, to get to my item banks, I clicked the vertical ellipses and that showed me again all my item banks. It's a little different when you're adding content from item banks. That's when you want to click this actual item banks option. So when I click that, it shows me the item banks I have access to, so I can decide what questions I want to add. So for example, if I want to add some questions from this chapter 5 item bank, I'm going to click into it and I can add questions individually by clicking on the plus. Okay, that puts it into my quiz. Another way is I can click all/random. And now that has added this option down into my quiz right here. So it's showing me that there's an option of 1 through 10 questions that came from that item bank. So there were 10 questions in that item bank. And I'm going to click edit. And so I can decide if I want to use all of the questions from that item bank, or if I want to randomly select questions So this is where kind of pulling from different question groups or pools of questions comes into play. So I can choose that maybe I just want to randomly select 3 questions, 5 questions, whatever it may be from that item bank. And then I can assign the points per question. So in this case, all of the questions have to be worth the same number of points. They don't give you an option to differentiate point amounts in this case. So I'm going to randomly pull 3 questions from my chapter 5 item bank. But maybe I'm having students do a review assignment, so I also want to pull questions from another item bank. So I can go again back into my item banks. And I can choose, maybe I want some questions about justice case study, so I can again do all the random. And then I can do that same thing again. So where was that? Must be down. Well, there it is. Okay. So I'm gonna edit. Again, I'm gonna randomly select questions. Again, some number that works for me, and done. And so that's how you can create, again, pools of questions of different topics, so that if a student has the option to retake a quiz, then each time they retake that quiz, they won't necessarily get the same questions. Or if you want different students to get different sets of questions that perhaps all meet the same objective but are asked in different ways, that would be another way to do that.
You can also use this not to pull a subset of questions, but purely just to randomize the order of the questions, right? So like
Yes,
that
good
first
point.
pool where you had, it's pulling from a bank of 10 questions. Instead of pulling 3 out of 10, you could pull 10 out of 10. So all students will get all the questions just in a different order,
Yeah.
which is just a simple randomization way of limiting how easy it is for students to answer share or tag team a quiz or something like that, because they're getting them all in different orders.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for adding that.
I was gonna say, just one of the benefits of this, it makes it super easy to interleave questions from previous chapters and such. You could just put, one question in just to kind of throw it in there and see how they're doing and how well they've retained information.
Yeah.
But then also I could see, just depending on how you've grouped your banks, you could group banks by objective or outcome.
Mhm.
And then just have this, I've got my 10 questions and this is, they'll start with these and then I can have another bank that'll be my next objective or outcome that I need to assess. I guess that's kind of one of the benefits of having everything with the same value, and I don't know, that just seems like a really easy workflow to me.
Yeah. Well, that interleaving activity is really a powerful evidence-based way for students to learn foundational facts and figures and memorization and stuff, is keep continually pulling back just a couple questions from previous quizzes each time. And there's lots of research and evidence that suggests that's maybe the most effective way for people to memorize foundational information.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else I want to point out is when you have a question stored in a question bank, if you deploy that question to more than one quiz, all of those, that it's still just one question and it's still sourcing back to that same item bank. So if you change it at the item bank level, which is the way you go in and edit, it will say it's going to take you to the item bank to edit that question. And it will impact any other quiz that it's in if students haven't yet taken that quiz. So if students have taken the quiz, then that will not impact what they've already done. It will not impact what it shows they've done. It will just impact any assessment moving forward.
Right. Which is like, that's one of the big benefits of the new item bank compared to the old quiz question bank, is it's more like a cloud-based system like a Google Doc or an Office 365 document where there aren't versions floating around. There's one centralized version of that item bank, which makes it super easy to maintain it across sections and across terms, which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
Chat.
Something in the chat. So Jennifer says, I feel like that interleaving option is already available to use question banks in the previous old quizzes.
Yes, that's true.
I guess that would just be a benefit of question banks.
Yeah,
in
that's
general,
question banks
but
in general.
Mhm.
I like how they do it here for sure.
And Jennifer likes the changes in questions not affecting students who already participated. Yes,
Mhm.
I agree with that too.
I do have a question. What do question analytics look like in question banks? Or maybe you are planning on getting to that later.
Well, no, I actually wasn't. That's a good question.
Because I think
Well,
we looked at quiz analytics in a previous tech talk. Where you kind of see what the average and the mean performance on individual questions are. I'm curious if you can do that from a question bank. And then it's pulling analytic data from multiple sections over time, so you get a big sample size.
I think that would be perfect world, but from my understanding, the item bank is separate from what happens at the course level.
Okay.
Which makes sense if you're sharing with a bunch of
Yeah, I
different
guess
instructors, you don't want their data
You don't want the
essentially
feedback
affecting
to
yours.
information back to, okay, you're right, that does make sense.
And-
For purpose reasons, we wouldn't want to do that.
And basically, anytime these gravitate out of the question bank, the moment that somebody submits something, it's makes that static in time.
That totally makes sense. Never mind. I take it back. There's a good reason why you wouldn't have analytic data in a potentially.
I mean, there's probably ways that Canvas could do it and it'd still be helpful, but
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
Okay. Jennifer says she wasn't a fan of quiz analytics for the old quiz questions anyway.
Yeah, it's limited to certain question types.
Mhm.
But again, refer back to
Use for sure.
the old tech talk about quiz analytics if that's a topic you're curious about.
That's really the gist of what I was planning to cover today. Those are the real basics of using item banks. Really just wanted to show how to create them, how to use them, how to share them. But yeah, I don't know, do you guys have other topics you think we need to cover?
Probably a question that might come up for some people is, if I've already been using question banks in old quizzes, how do I transfer that to new quizzes? And the answer to that is, right now it's complicated and messy, and you should just talk to us and we can help. The long-term answer, according to Instructure, is eventually they will have an easy way to convert old question banks into new item banks, but they haven't done that yet.
Well, and I will say, it's not that scary. Takes maybe 15 minutes, but there's a lot of moving parts. You have to create a quiz and copy it.
Yeah,
It
and we
takes
would
a little bit.
we would recommend that you just come and talk to one of us, and we can help you do that conversion process seamlessly and
You shouldn't have to do that on your own.
And once you get through the steps, though, it's not terrible. It's
Right.
just, there's several steps involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jennifer says only 30 something stuff, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like this for certain situations. If you are a big fan of having a big comprehensive question library, then this is a super helpful tool for that. And it might be worth converting your old question libraries into new item banks. If that's the kind of teacher that you are, and that's the workflow that you like. There's a lot of benefits to having one centralized item bank instead of having a bunch of versions floating around in different course sections. And the sharing feature is also super nice. Because you were, well, I guess you don't need to say the name, but you were working with an instructor on that exact situation where they have a template course that they want to give access to many adjuncts over time, adjuncts come and adjuncts go. How do we maintain one central library of questions? And this makes it pretty easy to do that.
It does. It's easier.
Especially with version history, because that was anytime I was working with an instructor in classic quizzes, question banks, that was like chaos.
Jennifer says, if you share to other instructors, can they eventually edit them? Well, so you can share it with edit privileges. And so instead of clicking view, you can allow editing. The other option is if you share it in, what do we decide? If you share it into the course and they copy that course, or they copy a quiz out of that course that uses these item bank questions, then they will have access to the item bank and they can copy them into a new item bank, which will give them full edit.
There is a process to pull individual questions from item bank into a new item bank for yourself, but it is a multi-step process, which again, if that's something so easy to do, maybe come and talk to us about it.
But yeah, it can be done. Okay.
Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm gonna go check on YouTube and see if we have anything going on over there, just in case. Otherwise, you made it through that in exactly 25 minutes, which is pretty impressive.
All right.
Cool.
think Jennifer and Professor Street were easy on us.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming and
Thanks for-
joining us.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next week when we are talking about
Humanizing your syllabus.
humanizing your syllabus,
Yeah,
which should be a really interesting topic.
yeah, one part tech, other part human.
Human.
Yeah. Like a cyborg.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't want to make that connection, but I think I ended up doing it.
All right, I'm gonna end the live stream. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye all.